Most of these gauchos are businessmen and ranch owners rather than working cowboys. But their costumes and equipment reflect the Spanish origins of many items associated with cowboys throughout the Americas. Gauchos also reflect the universal cowboy attitude.
A gaucho is not too easy to be governed. You cannot say, come here, go there. No, you must ask them, gentlemen, you'll be so kind to come with me because we have to take care of the cattle. They follow you until death.
Argentina's rural exposition is a celebration of the animals Christopher Columbus first brought to America from Europe. Animals that made the nation one of the world's richest at the end of the 19th century. This wealth attracted millions of immigrants from Europe, mainly Spain and Italy, who poured into the country after the Argentine army, mounted on horses, had largely destroyed the native Indian population. It was a pattern repeated throughout the Americas. This is Kansas today, but the cowboy and the cattle could be galloping across Texas in the early 1800s. These are Longhorns, a uniquely North American breed born of a cross between Spanish and English cattle. Going back to Columbus, cattle had been ranched in the Americas for their hide more than their meat. Leather could be sold. Meat could only be left to rot. But then came an event that changed not only the cattle business, but also the future of the American West.
The Civil War was a major interruption in the history of the United States. And throughout the South, as men went to battle, that left no one to do the routine work. In Texas, that meant that 5 years went by in which roundups weren't held. The Longhorns multiplied by the million because there was no outlet for them and no one to work them. So in 1865, after the war, Texans came back to millions of cattle and nothing to do with them. What they decided was to move them to northern ranges and try to get them to market. And that's where you had the wonderful classic meeting of the trail drives to the north, the railroads moving from the east to the west. That gave you a market connection that was unmatched.
This recreation of one of those great cattle drives has been organized for a group of tourists by Ray Moore.
Today we came 12 miles. And I would imagine that the big difference would be that back then, the horses was in condition. You know, they'd trail for several hundred miles by the time they got this far. And the people were in condition. They didn't take an hour lunch break. They didn't have 15, 20 gates to open. And on a cool, breezy day like today, those cattle, an old Longhorn steer, walk 3 miles an hour. And they drive from sun up to dark, so, you know, they get 25, 30 miles.
30 miles a day, 6 weeks on the trail. Hundreds of thousands of Longhorns were trailed north to the railheads. The most famous of all, Dodge City, Kansas. Dodge City in the 1870s became synonymous with the rip-roaring western frontier and the hard-drinking cowboy, and helped create a uniquely American hero.
Cowboy comes to encapsulate values that Americans consider truly American. Rugged individualism, a single, strong-willed person fighting on behalf of right. The cowboy's image resonates very strongly with larger American mythology. In a larger sense, Americans all come to think of themselves as cowboys.
Hey, you yeah! Come on!
Besides these seemingly positive attributes, there's the propensity for violence, the famous gunfights, the fist fights, which rarely happened. All of these things look great in B-Western movies. In reality, the cowboy's life was far less glamorous, far less exciting than what we find in popular imagery.
But cattle ranching was now a proven business, and the great grasslands of the northern plains, grazed only by buffalo, became a tempting rangeland. Only the Indians and their horses stood in the way. What finally defeated the Indians of the plains wasn't just the firepower and the horses of the U.S. cavalry, but the extermination, almost overnight, of their basic resource. By 1870, some 10 million buffalo had been slaughtered by hunters from the east, their carcasses left to rot, their hides shipped back to make coats and rags. General Phil Sheridan, the U.S. Army commander, hailed the hunters for destroying the Indians' commissary. Let them kill, skin, and sell until the buffalo are exterminated. Then your prairies can be covered with speckled cattle and the festive cowboy. The extermination of the buffalo left the Plains Indians nothing on which to survive. Herded into reservations, they were reduced to stealing from the white man the cattle that had taken the plains from the buffalo. But the cattle, too, were soon replaced by another import from the Old World, wheat. Like cattle, wheat had first been brought to the Americas by Columbus. When the northern plains proved too harsh for cattle ranching, and with the Indians now taken off the land and into reservations, wheat replaced the prairie itself. The cattle, meanwhile, found a home in vast feedlots. The Great Plains, once home to Indians and buffalo, began providing bread and beef on a scale unprecedented in history. By the late 19th century, the great heartland of the United States and the food it produced began attracting millions of Europe's poor and hungry. Europe itself was bursting at its seams, its population swollen thanks in part to another item of the Columbian Exchange. This time, a crop taken not from the old world to the new, but from the new to the old. Columbus discovered the South American continent in 1498. Only 40 years later, the Spanish arrived in the Andes. The people here grew crops the Spanish had never seen before. Many of these crops were root vegetables. Most are still today grown only in this unique high-altitude environment.
Oca. Oca es dulce.
Oca is sweet and succulent.
Ese es papalisa.
Papalisa is tart and chewy.
Esa es la papa, eh?
But this tuber, the potato, was to outgrow its origins as a subsistence crop in the Andes to become the food of the poor over much of the world. The Indians of the Andes invented sophisticated agricultural techniques to go along with the crops they developed. These raised beds between canals recreate a method of growing potatoes used 300 years before the Spanish came. Here, near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, the long-forgotten platform agriculture has recently been reintroduced and is producing higher yields than present-day techniques of potato farming in the Andes. The skilled farmers of these ancient lands developed many hundreds of varieties of potatoes. On any day in the city of La Paz in Bolivia, the astonishing bounty of Andean agriculture is on display in the markets. The Spanish who came here almost 5 centuries ago were much more interested in the gold and silver the Andean soil possessed than the roots it nurtured. Potatoes may be suitable food for Indians, but hardly for Spanish conquistadors. Potato plants did have pretty flowers, though, and began being grown as curiosities in European botanical gardens. Until, in the 18th century, the humble potato became a lifesaver. This is the town of Ziegenhain in Germany, celebrating the 261st anniversary of its townspeople being tricked into eating potatoes. The author of the trick was the Margrave of Hesse. The potato at the time had the reputation of causing flatulence, excessive lust, even leprosy.
So, liebe Landleute, dieses Kartoffelstück wird jetzt verspeist. Auf geht's.
And some people in Ziegenhain had already tried the potato once, with unfortunate results.
They tried to eat the wrong part of the potato. They ate the green fruits which grow over the bottom, and it didn't taste very good. And so they decided not to eat the potato.
Sensibly enough, since the green potato fruit is poisonous. But the region was outrunning its supplies of rye and other cereal staples of the day. The Margrave of Hesse knew his people would plant potatoes only if they were convinced it was wholesome and harmless. So he prepared a feast, a familiar salad of lettuce, bacon, and sour milk, to which he added, at the last minute, boiled potatoes. The meal was a great success. The potato had many advantages to the poor, not only of Germany, but much of the rest of Northern Europe. It is easy to plant and cultivate. Even a small patch of land can grow a useful crop. As Europe began to industrialize, the potato allowed factory laborers to grow much of their own food. Europe's population increased to the point where the potato became the difference between life and death. And nowhere more so than here in Southwest Ireland. The potato came to Ireland early. One legend suggests potatoes were washed ashore with the wreckage of ships from the Spanish Armada. More likely, it was brought by Spanish fishermen to the small ports along the southern Irish coast. However it arrived, the potato and Ireland seemed to be made for each other.
One of the advantages of the potato is that it would grow on poor, thin and acidic soils when other crops wouldn't grow. But an even greater advantage was, in these conditions, that if you had seaweed available in great quantity,